I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened on Yamara 9, because my supervisor, Director Vasic, has been calling it a diplomatic incident in his reports, and I think that is a cowardly way to describe it. I did not cause an incident. I prevented one. The incident that came after, the one with the matriarch, the claiming right, the hatchlings following me to the commissary every morning for 6 weeks, that was not my fault either. Mostly. My name is Marcus Hale. I am a Class 3 security contractor licensed to operate in 14 Concordat jurisdictions. I have guarded mineral transport ships, alien dignitaries, and one very paranoid Grelian ambassador who was convinced her own shadow was following her. I have seen a lot of things. I had never, before the day in question, been claimed by an apex predator from the Cathara matriarchy. Live and learn. Yamara 9 is nobody's idea of a paradise posting. It orbits a dead pulsar that does not even have the decency to look dramatic anymore. Just a faint electromagnetic pulse every 1.3 seconds that makes your dental fillings ache if you stand in the wrong corridor. The station is old, patched, and smells like recycled atmosphere and ambition, but it sits at a junction point between 4 territorial blocks, which makes it diplomatically important and physically miserable in equal measure. I had been there 4 months when the Cathara delegation arrived. The Cathara are 6-limbed, bioluminescent, and faster than anything their size has any right to be. They are predators in the oldest sense, not aggressive, not hostile, just built that way. Every other species in the room knows it on some deep level. The photophores along their neck spines pulse with their emotional state, which sounds charming, until you realize it means you always know exactly how a Cathara feels about you. There is no polite ambiguity with them, no small talk to hide behind. What they feel, they show. Matriarch Saraketh was the head of the delegation. I saw her once before the incident, across the reception hall during an arrival ceremony. Tall, dark-furred over the shoulders, bioluminescence running silver-blue down her throat. She moved the way large cats move in old nature documentaries, like gravity was more of a suggestion than a rule. I was assigned to Level 4, Corridor 7C, perimeter duty, standard rotation. My job was to stand at an intersection near the Cathara habitat wing and make sure nobody wandered in who was not supposed to, and that nobody wandered out who was not supposed to. Quiet work. I liked quiet work. I should have known quiet work never lasts. The breach alarm came at 0417 station time, not a weapons breach. A pressure seal failure on Habitat Bay 7. Automated systems kicked in, emergency bulkheads started cycling, and a section of Corridor 7C lost its lights when the pressure differential hit. In the dark, I heard the sound. High-pitched, rapid, multiple sources. Not a sound I could identify, but something very old inside me. Something that existed long before space travel. Filed it under young animal in distress. I had my helmet lamp on before I consciously decided to move. There were 4 of them in the dark. Cathara hatchlings, none of them taller than my midsection. Photophores firing in panicked pulses of red gold. They had been in a small side passage between the habitat and the educational wing when the emergency doors cycled and sealed them in. Alone. In the dark, panicking. My professional assessment said, 4 scared children, no visible danger, doors will reopen in 6 to 8 minutes. My actual response was to cross the corridor, sit down on the deck in the middle of them, and say, "Hey, it is okay. I am right here." I do not know what came over me. I do not speak Cathara. They do not speak standard. But I sat down to get to their level, held very still, and kept my voice low and even, the way my mother used to do when I was 8 years old, and a thunderstorm had convinced me the world was ending. "There it is," I said. "You hear that? Pressure is equalizing. Those are the seals coming back online. That is a good sound. 6 minutes, maybe less, and those doors open." One of them made a clicking trill, low and questioning. "Yeah," I said. "I do not know what that means, but I am going to agree with you." The panicked red gold in their photophores began shifting, cooling toward amber, then toward something quieter. 3 of them moved closer. The smallest one pressed its nose to my forearm and made another clicking sound. "That is fine," I said. "That is fine." We sat in the dark together for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. until the emergency bulkheads cycled and the lights came back on. I thought that was the end of it. I wrote it up in my incident report and considered the matter closed. Director Vasek called me into his office at 07 o'clock. He looked like a man who had not slept, and had also received several very important communications he did not want to receive. "Hale," he said. "What did you do?" I told him. He listened with the expression of someone trying to defuse a device they had never seen before. "You sat down on the floor with them," he said. "Yes, sir." "One of them touched you." "Its nose." "Yes, sir. I did not initiate it." He pressed both hands over his face. "Do you know what the Kethera do when a non-pack member shows protective behavior toward the young?" I told him I did not. They have a word for it. Kethavar. It means, roughly, one who shelters the hatchlings is of the blood. There is a formal rite. The matriarch invokes it, and once invoked, it cannot be undone. There was a pause. "How permanent?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "Very." Lore Speaker Dovin met me outside the Kethera wing at 09 o'clock. He was smaller than the others, older, with photophores that ran a slow, steady teal, which I would later learn meant deep amusement. He looked me up and down. "You are smaller than I expected." "People say that," I replied. "The hatchlings have been practicing phrases in standard. They have learned, there it is. Yeah? And that is fine." He tilted his great head. "They are very pleased with themselves. I am not sure how to feel about that." "You should feel honored," he said. "Do you know how many species give Kethera hatchlings a wide distance? All of them. Every species in the Concordat. They see the young, they see the mother, and they think, dangerous family. I will be careful." He paused. "You sat on the floor with them in the dark." "They were scared," I said. "Yes. That is what you do when young things are scared." Dovin looked at me for a long moment. His photophores shifted from teal to warm amber gold. "Yes," he said quietly. "That is what you do." The matriarch agrees. The formal Kethavar rite was not what I expected. I had prepared myself for something long and ceremonial, full of symbols I would not understand. What I got was Saraketh walking into the meeting room and looking at me for a long, still moment. Her photophores were silver white, the color, I would later learn, of deep certainty. She spoke. Dovin translated. She says, "You covered the young with your body before you knew if it was safe. You did not calculate. You simply went. She wants to know, is this a human thing or a you thing?" I thought about it honestly. Both, I think. Another exchange. She says the distinction does not matter. The result is the same. Dovin paused. She is invoking the right. She asks if you understand what this means. "Not entirely," I said. "But I am listening." When Dovin translated that, something in Saraketh's expression shifted, a softening around the eyes. Her photophores pulsed once, a quick flare of something warm. She says, "Good. The ones who say they understand everything are the dangerous ones." The hatchlings started following me the next morning, all four, in a line, at a respectful distance that nonetheless made it very obvious that I had a four-child Kethera escort wherever I went on level 4. My colleagues found this entertaining. My supervisor found it alarming. The Kethara security staff watched with the expression of adults who had seen this happen before and had accepted that there was nothing to be done about it. On day 11, Saraketh requested a private meeting. Just her, me, and Dovin translating. I sat across from her at a low table and waited, and something about her stillness made it easier to be still myself. She spoke for a while, then Dovin turned to me. She says, "I know this is unusual. I know your kind is not accustomed to being claimed. I know the word frightens you, the way all binding things frighten creatures who have spent their lives untethered." I kept my expression neutral. She says, "I am not trying to take something from you. I am trying to give you something. There is a difference, and I ask that you know it." I asked what she was giving me. "Somewhere that is yours," Dovin translated. "A place in the pack that no one can take away. Not because you earned it by bloodline or politics or transaction. Because you acted as pack without being asked." I looked at the table. I had been a contractor for 9 years, 12 postings. Not one had lasted more than 18 months. I owned a travel bag, a savings account, and a very specific set of skills that worked anywhere, which I had always told myself was freedom. She also says, Dovan added quietly, that she saw the sensor footage. She knows you crossed the corridor before the lights came on. She knows you could not see them yet when you moved. I did not say anything. She wants you to know she noticed that. I called my mother that night. There was a 14-minute signal delay each way, so I recorded a message. I told her I was fine. The posting was fine. There had been a development that was complicated to explain but was probably also fine. I told her I had met some kids who were scared in the dark and I sat with them, and somehow that had turned into a whole thing. I told her I had been given a name, that it meant something like the safe darkness. Then I sat in my bunk and stared at the ceiling for a long time. On day 19, the smallest hatchling got into an argument with a Grelian diplomat's aide in the commissary. I heard it from the doorway, rapid photophore cycling, and a sound like a malfunctioning radar dish. I walked over, crouched down, and said in my flattest voice, "What is going on here?" The hatchling made a complicated trill. The aide said the hatchling had been blocking the beverage station for 11 minutes. I looked at the hatchling. She looked at me. Her photophores did a quick amber pulse that I had learned meant, I was here first, and I am correct, and I would like this acknowledged. I stood up and said to the aide, "The beverage station has 6 access points. You used the one where she was standing, instead of the other 5. She was in the most convenient. She was there first. There are 5 other access points." The aide looked at me, looked at the hatchling, and left. The hatchling clicked my name. "Do not make it a habit," I told her. She clicked it again, more firmly. I took that as agreement. Saraketh was in the corridor outside. She had heard everything. I do not know how long she had been standing there. Cathara move quietly when they want to. She said something. A junior delegation member nearby translated softly. She says, "Yes, him." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It is confirmation. The matriarch has been watching since the breach. She is confirming her judgment." I said, "Tell her I heard her." It was relayed. Saraketh listened, and something in her face changed. Not much, not dramatically, but she inclined her great head, just slightly, and the silver white in her photophores went warm. I put in a request to extend my Yamara 9 posting by 12 months. Vasek stared at me, as if I had said something in a language he did not speak. "I am doing it," I said, "because there are 4 hatchlings who have decided I know what I am doing in the dark, and I do not want to let them down." He put his face in his hands. I took that as approval. Dovan found me on the observation deck that evening. We stood together and looked out at the dead pulsar. I had stopped noticing the ache in my teeth. "You are staying," he said. "Yeah. The matriarch will be pleased." He was quiet for a moment. "You are not what we expected from humans. We had files, statistics about behavior in conflict, nothing about what you do in the dark." "We do okay in the dark," I said. "Yes, the galaxy does not know this yet. It will." That was month 1. Month 2 was something else entirely. The Concordat sent an observer, a senior diplomat named Counselor Vreth, from the Polani Union, which is a species that communicates almost entirely through posture and considers emotional expression to be a sign of poor upbringing. She arrived with 3 assistants and an immediate opinion about everything. She took one look at me, walking through the corridor, with 4 Cathara hatchlings trailing behind me in a line, and said, "Is that authorized?" "Complicated question," I said. "Simplify it." The short answer is yes. The longer answer involves an ancient rite of claiming and about 60 pages of paperwork that the Concordat Legal Commission is still reviewing. She looked at the hatchlings. The smallest one looked back at her with the focused attention that young Cathara give to things they find interesting and are not yet sure about. Her photophores ran a cautious yellow-green. Counselor Vreth looked back at me. "You are the human who sat on the floor with them." That is one way to describe it. "Every other species on this station would have retreated from that corridor," she said. It was not quite a question. "I know," I said. "Why did you not?" I thought about it for a moment. "Because they were small, and they were scared, and I was there. That is really all there is to it." She studied me for a long time, with the kind of focus that makes you want to check if something is on your face. Then she said, "Remarkable," turned, and walked away with her assistants. Dovan, who had appeared beside me at some point during this exchange, said, "She will write about you." "I would rather she did not." "She already is," he said pleasantly. "You have been here 2 months, and you have already changed how 3 species think about humans. This is, I believe, a record." I was going to say something modest about that, but the smallest hatchling pressed her head briefly against my hand, clicked my name, and then moved on down the corridor as if she had simply needed to confirm I was still there, as if checking that the ground was still solid under her feet. I stopped thinking about what I was going to say and just watched her go. Month 3 brought a different kind of test. A minor territorial dispute in the outer corridor section turned into a shouting match between 2 alien delegation members, and the noise carried through the ventilation all the way to level 4. I was on duty nearby. I handled it the usual way, stepped between them, kept my voice calm, used about 4 words where most people would use 40, and got it settled in under 10 minutes. What I did not know was that Saraketh had seen this too. She found me afterward, when I was doing my end-of-shift notes near the junction wall. She stood a few meters away and waited until I looked up. Then she said something, just a few short words, and walked on. I asked Dovan later. He smiled, which on a Cathara looks a little alarming until you get used to it. She said, "He is the same in the light as he is in the dark." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, but I thought about it for the rest of the day. That is the thing about Saraketh, that I could not quite explain to anyone, including myself. She was not warm in the way that felt easy or obvious. She was not small or soft or simple. She was large and powerful, and moved like something that had never in its life been afraid of anything. But she watched carefully. She paid attention to things that other people, other beings, would walk past without noticing. And when she spoke, even translated through Dovan, there was a weight to the words that made you feel like she had considered each one before she let it out. Dovan told me once, when I asked, that she had led the matriarchy for 22 years, that she had negotiated 7 territorial boundaries, resolved 2 internal crises, and raised 4 children of her own, before the hatchlings, who were now following me around the station. She does not trust easily, he said, but when she trusts completely. Should that scare me? I asked. Probably a little, he said, but I think you can manage it. On the last evening of month 3, there was a small gathering in the Cathara Habitat Wing. Not a ceremony, just a quiet meal. The kind of thing a family does on an ordinary night. Dovan invited me, and I almost said no, and then I thought about the word untethered, and went anyway. I sat at a low table with 4 hatchlings, one very amused lore speaker, and a matriarch who had the kind of quiet authority that does not need to announce itself. We did not talk much. There was food I mostly could not eat, and some I could, and at some point, the smallest hatchling climbed up and sat beside me, and went to sleep leaning against my arm, and nobody thought this was unusual except me. Saraketh watched this happen. Her photophores ran silver-white, that color of deep certainty, and then slowly, gradually, shifted into something warmer, something I did not have a word for yet but that felt, in the way that some things feel before you have language for them, like ease, like the end of a long search. I looked at her across the table. She looked back at me. Neither of us said anything. We did not need to. The hatchling between us was breathing slowly, warm and completely at rest, her small photophores pulsing a quiet, contented blue. I thought about 12 postings in 9 years. I thought about a travel bag and a savings account, and the particular freedom of having nowhere that was specifically yours. I thought about my mother's voice in a thunderstorm, and a dark corridor, and a small creature pressing its nose to my forearm in the middle of it. I thought about a matriarch with silver certainty in her photophores saying, "I am not trying to take something from you." The Concordat Legal Commission formally recognized the Kethavar right as a valid diplomatic category, 8 months after the breach event. Director Vasek submitted for medical leave shortly afterward, and I chose not to find that suspicious. The hatchlings grew taller, learned more standard words, and stopped following me in a line, not because they trusted me less, but because they had decided I could probably be trusted to find my own way around without supervision. This was, Dovan told me, a significant milestone. I still play the Cathara strategy game with him every third evening. I have not won once. I suspect I am not going to. As for Saraketh, I am still figuring that out. Some things do not move fast, and I have learned that rushing them does not help. What I know is that every evening when I walk past the habitat wing on my last round of the night, there is a moment, brief, quiet, where the lights through the window are warm and there is a familiar sound from inside, and something in my chest does a thing I do not have a word for yet. I am working on it. I told my mother, in the last message I sent, that I had found something I did not expect to find out here, that it was not what I thought belonging would look like, and that it was also, somehow, exactly right. She sent back a recording. She said, "Marcus, you have always been a person who walks toward the sound. I am glad you finally found somewhere that needed that." She also asked when she was going to meet them. I told her I was working on it. The dead pulsar outside still ticks every 1.3 seconds. I have completely stopped noticing the ache. I am not going anywhere.